Good morning. How are you guys doing? Just gonna adjust my camera here. Let's see. You want the face cam right there. There we go. I think I got the right angle there. How are you guys doing? Can you guys hear me? Well, I'm obviously wearing my Hawthorne. I love it. It's so comfortable. And I'm really pleased with how it fits. And I know what I'm going to do next, differently next. So that's great. And I'm definitely going to make another one. So if someone says you can hear me and you can see me, hello. So I'm going to be working on this Aster. I know I've said it 1,000 times. Hi, Kirby. And I made one a couple weeks ago off camera. Hi, Janice. And I just want to revisit it because it is a really simple sew through. I think the trickiest bit is the placket juncture where the bias is sewn on. So I think that's why I did a trial yesterday. I don't know if you saw it on my Instagram post, but I wanted it to, because I just kind of winged it the first time and I did it correctly, but I just felt like I was kind of puzzling how they planned on that going through because the placket isn't a straight V, it is squared off like most plackets are, and so it makes it a little trickier. So this comes in a few different views. So it's got this like fluttery sleeve. I'm not a big fan of fluttery sleeves on me, but I really like them, mainly because my shoulders are straight across and it just makes me look really broad-shouldered. This one is long sleeved with tucks. They're just little pin tucks across the front yoke there, or front bodice. There is not a yoke on the front. The yoke is on the back. And then this short sleeve version, and it's got just a sleeve band. That's a cuff that doesn't open. The sleeve does have an opening slit cuff thing there. I probably should have made that one because I realized that's probably a good technique to see someone sew through. So I'm making it in a chambray, kind of similar to that. And maybe it's because I saw it on the pattern envelope that I was like, oh, I can make this. I have this fabric sitting here. And this is the awl that I'm always using, this tapered tailor's awl. They sell two that I'm aware of, and the other one is longer and sharper, and more is not better in the case of this awl. Here's mine. I've had it forever. It's my second awl. My first one just had a little simple blue handle, and I don't know who made it, but they issued it to me in design school, and it was a little smaller, and I lost it. Like, it just finally vanished, as well as a couple other of my tools that I've been using for forever. I still have my rulers from college, even though I got rid of the L square, which is just a ruler that's in the shape of an L, because they're notoriously not square. They're not 90 degree angle, so they are inaccurate, and I finally threw it away when I figured it out. We had that suspicion when we were all in school, but we weren't experts, so who are we to say that our ruler was off? But if you would have kept drawing those two lines of that ruler to infinity, they would have either intersected or been a wider angle than 90 degrees, so I got rid of that thing. So let's see here. I have my pattern piece is all laid out, and this one I'm gonna serge. Since I've done the French seams on the other two outfits lately, these dresses, I'm going to use a serger version. So now you know how to do French seams, you know how to modify it, and I can actually tell you that as I go as well. And what I did was I serged them ahead of time, so you don't have to see me with my back doing that. So the first step I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get right into this, is I'm going to do my darts, and the reason I have these extra pins here is because when I overlocked it, it kind of obscures the notches, because remember, I don't do the little triangle poking out. I just nip into the fabric, and then I have my darts marked here, the tip. I know that the way I will remember how this is where the pin went into the fabric like that. I know that's the point. And so then I'll do this one as well, and then I just pull it apart like that. And I would like this to be the right side because of the serging looks nicer on that side to me than this side. Yeah, serging does kind of have a right and a wrong side, but it's not an official thing. It just looks nicer on this side, and I think we all kind of agree that on that. Where's my pin cushion? Oh, right here. So I'm just going to take one pin, and I'm just going to transfer all these to the other side so that they are on the wrong side. And I'm actually going to just, well, you know, I'm actually not going to nip into that. I'm just going to leave that unbroken. I was going to, like, you can actually see my little notches, so I can probably get rid of these. It was a little overkill. I don't really like using pins. But I didn't want to lose sight of it as I was sewing. So I'm going to get rid of those. There's only a dart on the front bodice, and it's a side seam, a side bust dart. And I just leave that hanging there. I know it's a little, it could fall out. I line up my notches. This is how you can kind of, it's a double check on if you cut your garment on grain is, and that the dart was drafted correctly, that you don't get any torquing, because the legs of the dart, that's what these are, the legs, should line, the notch should line up, and there shouldn't be any weirdness. It should just want to fold right to that point. There is a lot of wrong ways to draft a dart, and I just put this straight from my needle. I'm not going to back tack. I'm going to get to the end, and I have to, like, on my machine, it stops needle down. I put the hand crank up, pull it out, which releases the tension of the upper disc. That's when that's what you want. You want to put your thread take-up lever, which is this guy right here, to the top if you don't want to unthread your needle every time that you pull your work out. I swear, that was the biggest pet peeve for me when I was a new sewer. I mean, the biggest. It would just almost make me cry, you know? I would be sewing along and struggling with something, get past it, and or be like, I have everything precariously pinned and I'm holding it with all my fingers, you know, and then, you know, all my fingers because I wished I had 20 of them. And then I would go to start sewing and the needle would unthread. I know each and every one of you have had this happen. And I'll tell you what, I finally just sat there and was like, what makes this do this? Because a home sewing machine doesn't stop with the needle down or the needle up, or it didn't used to, and now you can buy them so that they do. And that's what it is. It's this thread take-up lever. Once that's up at the top, it's not going to yank the thread out of the needle when you start again. Okay, I'm not going to back tack. I'm going to get right to that point. Put my thread, and I have to do that to get the needle out of the fabric and also to relieve the tension. So just because the needle's out of your fabric, it doesn't mean that the thread take-up lever is to the top. And I'm hand tying the end of my dart. I'm doing that to reduce the bulk, and also because all these people are watching me. This is the way you're supposed to sew a dart. I have a suspicion that my upper and lower threads are different threads. One looks heavier to me, or a different color. No, they're fine. They're fine. Just making sure. I always trim as I go. I left a lot of my serger tails originally. So now I have my dart. The dart always gets pushed down. And so when you're not sewing with instructions, there's always an order of operations when you sew a bodice. You do your darts, your pockets, all of your accessory type things that you would put on. So now I'm going to assemble the yoke to the back. And the reason I didn't serge the shoulders, you're going to see why, is because they're all enclosed inside the yoke. It's the same with this back here. The top seam, the yoke seam, doesn't need to be serged right up here. So I'm going to pin the pleat that's in the back, and it's an inverted pleat, which means that the folds are on top And I'm pretty sure this is how it's lined up. Like there's a lot of ways to line up a pleat. I'm going to try and get it as straight as possible and my seam allowances lined up. That way it won't hang at a funny angle. I hate this big lip on my machine bed there. It's like that. And I'm going to do it just inside the seam allowance so that I can leave it in there. No need to back tack. There we go. So that's an inverted pleat. That's not. See, I feel like it is hanging at a funny angle here, so let's see. See how this one right here is dipping below? That's why. So let's move that one up and we'll sew it from this side. Just like that. So what are you guys doing today? You guys sewing along? Are you drinking your coffee still? I mean, if you're in the West, you might still be waking up. Anyone sew anything recently or cut anything out? Okay, so there's 2 yokes. And I'm going to make a yoke sandwich. Really, I'm going to make a bodice sandwich, and yoke is the yolk is the bread. So, just like this. Am I holding it in camera? Yeah. Is it bright enough for you guys? Looks a little dark. Do you want me to brighten it up a little bit? Just let me know. I can brighten it up. I have big lights, but I feel like if I do too much, it gets a little overexposed because of the white machine bed. So I just sit here and I don't use pins, right? So okay, so I don't think I did my pleat right because look at all that extra there. Or I did too big of a pleat. How did I do that? Let's check it out. So yeah, you want to stop right now. You don't want to go all the way to the end and then have to deal with that. That's going to affect the fit. Ooh, Brooke, you're dyeing indigo. Oh, cool. It's slow. You're not. Do you work on Saturdays, Kirby? I thought you worked Monday through Friday now. Okay, so this is how I'm gonna go about figuring this out. I'm gonna pin this end, and now I know I want my. So this pattern doesn't actually have a center notch on the back, and anything I cut on the fold, I just nip it at an angle, like this, to mark the center. Or, you can stick your fingers, your scissors in the fold there and nip it a little bit, just so that you have that. So this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to push this all the way to here. Oh, I see, it's half that. Okay, and then I'm going to mark and put that there. That's interesting. It's a much smaller pleat than I thought. But I really want, why is it so tiny? That pleat. What's the point of it? I don't remember it being that small. Interesting. All right, so I can do this. Pin it on either side like this. And then when it's on, can you see that? You know what? I know. This will be even easier. Because this apparently, this notch is the pleat line. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to sew it about an inch down like this. Maybe it's designed this way. I don't think so though. And now I'm going to, because now I know it's going to line up. Now what I'll do is open this up and just center it like that. Pleats are this whole science. They need to be sewn accurately because the volume that you can create by accident with your pleats can really get out of control. Oh, okay, Kirby. So you're allowed to fool around. I actually worked somewhere once where the guy was obsessed with getting all the, he had a plaid. It was actually a mother-daughter dress wear company. My friends have probably heard me tell the story, so there you go. They had this Christmas dress that was all plaid, and it was a small plaid, like smaller than this. And they really, it was a pleated bodice, so it was a very simple silhouette, just like I'm wearing. And the skirt was pleated, and they really wanted the plaids to match on the skirt, match to the bodice, match at the side seams, match all the way around. And I was in college at the time, so I was skilled enough to actually be working in the field, but not skilled enough for that. And they were not from the garment industry. So they were relying on me for all of that. I'm going to top stitch this. This is preference where you want it. You would definitely want it close to the fold, but you could do 2 rows if you want to. And it was a fiasco. Like I would do the grading for them and do some production sewing for them, all on home sewing machines. That's how amateur this was. And they had a catalog company because catalogs were there was no internet then. And he had worked at Boeing or somewhere like that. It wasn't Boeing, it was in Long Beach. His line was, I've put parts on the moon. I should be able to put this, match these plaids. And I was just like, yeah, but, fabric stretches, there's, different amounts. That ratio of plaid isn't the same as the ratio of the sizing. So, yeah, I stayed there a little while, but it was probably one of the first places I was like, yeah, these people are crazy. I don't need to stay here. All right, so I'm going to fully encase this so that I don't have any raw edges on my yoke, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm putting the right side of the shirt to this shoulder here, okay? This is tricky. You got to really keep your head on straight for this the first few times you do this, especially if the neck opening is smaller or the shoulder's wider. It can get a little tricky, but it's totally possible almost every single time. And now I'm going to do this. I'm going to just take these and put them like this. And I know now that I have the correct sides together. I can let it get messy. I just needed to know that I'm putting it together the correct way and get it under the needle. And then the machine's going to help me keep it track fit. And then I don't have to do a French seam here. I don't have to serge. I don't have to do anything else. It'll just be fully encased. Nice and clean finish. And I'd much rather sew a straight seam than serge or do a French seam. So see, now it's fully clean. You just got to make sure then you can keep track of your outer and your inner shirt and you don't accidentally sew it together finally the wrong way. Okay, so let's put our other one. Do any of you do this? Have you guys done yokes before? I had this very long phase of being really into making button-down shirts and things, and getting like sleeve plackets correct, the like tailored kind, collars with collar stands, and doing men's shirts and sewing them for my husband and his brother occasionally. And yeah, it was just like, I think as a sewist, you kind of go through these different phases of what you like to sew or what you're interested in. Just depends on why you're getting into it, right? And for me, I just really wanted to be like, well, how'd they do that? And why can't I do that? So there we go. So now it's completely clean finished. No serger necessary. This fabric is very, it's not open, but it's very I can tell it stretches a lot for being a woven. You see that? It's not a stretch fabric. It's just that it's kind of an open weave. Very forgiving. I'm trying not to stretch it too much as I sew it on there. Okay, there we go. Snazzy. You could do really fun things with this. You could put a contrast yoke on the inside. You could put a contrast yoke on the outside. You could put an embroidery here, ribbon across it. You could do a different pattern going either direction. I mean, I love yokes for that reason. It's a really fun way to be bold with your fabric choices without being overt about it as well. So let's see, what do we have here? I think we're going to do the neckline right now. So here's my binding, sewing binding together. I have 2 pieces of binding here. I think one is maybe, no, it's not long enough for the neckline, so I have to sew it together. And here's my tip, you guys. When you have lots of pieces of bias and you need one continuous long strip, because it's nice if you have it just already in that strip before you start sewing, you don't have to stop. You want the 2 pieces that are exactly the same angle, and then like pretend like this is the right side. This is an elephant print on this side, and this is an elephant print on this side, right? So that's the right side of the fabric. It's very clear because I could totally cheat with this fabric, right, and sew it however I want. But you want it, when you're going to sew it together, both points exactly the same. This is totally contrary to what you think. And then you take this one and sew it like this. And you line it up at the seam line. Remember how we talked about seam allowances? Anything beyond the seam line is your seam allowance. My seam allowance can be whatever I want for this. I'm only going to use 1/4 of an inch because it's bias. I don't want a big one. I'd have to trim it down anyway. And then at that juncture is where I start my sewing. And when you line it up and sew it at that seam line, whatever seam allowance you pick, because I could have lined this up for a bigger one, but it would have gotten up pretty narrow. It's going to be a nice smooth line. Now you see that? So now it's a nice smooth line. Yeah, I know this is very stretchy fabric because the weave is open and this is on the bias. So yeah, I know it's a little bit off, but I'm telling you, it's nice to have a nice smooth. Oh gosh, I just cut a chunk out of it. That's not smooth. I'm actually gonna get rid of these tails so they don't bug me later. I totally cut a chunk out of my binding. It looks like I didn't line it up at all. Oh well. We are gonna smooth that out. No one's looking, right? All right, so I'm putting my bias trim to the inside of the garment, and the way this placket sews, you should too. Don't get clever with your binding on the edge or on the outside unless you modify your placket. And so the trick with this placket is to leave a tail. I'm going to go kind of far beyond. I could actually just go like there, because it needs to just go into that placket when it's sewn over. So I'm going to sew it 1/4 of an inch seam, just like that. Yeah, so I'm sewing this right sides together. I should have you know what, I'm going to stay stitch my neckline because this fabric is so whooshy, and I meant to do that when the whole yoke was on there. So we're going to stay stitch it first. I'm going to be really careful when I'm taking this out that I'm not stretching out my neckline right now. So I'm kind of holding it like that. And now I'm going to do this. Sorry guys. Better to fix it now and to have a better garment in the end. I'll pull it like this. That's fine. That doesn't stretch it out. It gets rid of all of it. So I'm going to stay stitch the neckline. I'm not going to lengthen my stitch actually. I'm going to make sure that the garment's not pulling down like it's pulling. There's a lot of garment on my lap here. And like I said, it's a very whooshy fabric. I don't want the neckline to get stretched out. You don't have to worry about it right here. It's just that, remember, like this right here is on the bias. And we all know that gapping neckline, and we really don't like it that much. We all wonder, why do we do that? No need to back tack. I'm going to get rid of my tail just so that it doesn't accidentally sneak out in through a seam and then show on the outside, and then I'm trying to find the end of it. All right, let's start over again here. This already feels a lot more stable. And I think because this fabric is so wishy, I'm going to, wishy is a technical term, by the way, I'm going to pull my bias a tiny bit. I'm kind of pushing this so that it doesn't get stretched out as I go as well. And I'm pulling my bias a little more than a little. This is really, really open weave fabric. I can just tell it wants to. When I get to the seam of my bias here, I'm going to open it up. That way it'll be a lot less bulky and more invisible, and maybe no one will notice it. Mainly me. Maybe I won't notice it. Yeah, that's what I want to do, I think. Okay, I'm going to cut this off like that. I'm just going to leave that for now, and now I'm going to clip my neckline right here on this curve. See this back neck curve right here? I'm going to clip my neckline there. So you can already see the bias is already wanting to turn to the inside because I stretched it a little bit. I feel like I need music. But I want to get tossed off of YouTube for using copyright music. And I'm not techie enough to know how to play their copyright-free music in my stream. Is that my, yeah, there it is. It's right here, actually. Okay. I went for that seam in my bias thinking that was my shoulder. All right. So this is my one thing, my fit issue on my Hawthorne is that the bodice is a little long, and so it's riding up a little bit. I tend to be a little short-waisted and busty. I don't think I'm going to clip any of this, except you do need to clip right here at this juncture, down to your stitching, not through it, just like that. And this is for this next step because we want that bias to go to the inside. I'm going to understitch it first. And then I'm going to try and sew this all in one piece with the placket. I have a thread tail sneaking through. There we go. Okay, so understitching, you always put the seam allowance towards the piece you're stitching onto, right? And this just helps it turn to the inside. And again, I'm actually trying to make sure that my garment's not pulling this way, like the weight of it, because any little thing can start stretching it out, your neckline out. I think pulling on my bias was a good choice in this fabric. Another tip I want to say is if you wanted to do something really creative, like have a contrast bias, like neckline at this, like as a contrast, that would be really cute. The only thing is make sure you pre-wash that fabric as well as this, because this will shrink differently than your fabric, and you wouldn't want that to start drawing in your neckline a different way, because the grain lines are different on the bias they are as they're sewing it to the bodice or the garment, and you just need the shrinkage to be taken out of both. Because remember that hem I showed you, how my hem is bumpy, and it's only bumpy on the dress side, not the bias side, because the dress had already shrunk and then the bias shrunk when I washed it, because I used some of our chicken boots binding that's not pre-washed, and the bias was nice and smooth, but it pulled in my dress hem and made it look a little bumpy. Doesn't stop me from doing that, I know, but still. That's my cautionary tale. Okay, I didn't use interfacing this time either. Totally doing this quick and dirty, you guys. My arguments about interfacing, I do use it sometimes, but you will see me skip it sometimes. And it is only because I don't use fusible. That is just my own personal thing. I don't like gluing things to my garment. But they've come a long way. They're really great. You can totally use them, and they are nice if you don't want something fiddly. Like fusing your interfacing to your piece is the way to go if you don't want something fiddly. Just make sure you protect your ironing board, because when you're gluing on that, you don't want to iron right onto your ironing board as well. You don't want the glue residue to be on your ironing board, because when you go to iron something else, it might get on that. That's what I'm trying to say. But if I do use store-bought interfacing, usually like it's under the brand name Pellon, so sometimes people call it Pellon. I do occasionally, but there's other brand names. I use the non-fusible. And then occasionally I just use the fabric that I'm making the garment out of, because I know that it's going to shrink the same. I know that it's going to feel the same. This doesn't always work. Sometimes it's too heavy. I wouldn't do this in like a suit jacket. I don't make a lot of suit jackets. I went through that phase and sewed a lot of those at one point. But I do like the way that this feels. Like this fabric's going to work really well for this. Except for all these little threads. But, you know, I'm going to get rid of most of those, and that's not going to happen anymore once it's encased in here. So, I think, yeah, so that's my placket right there. Right. Yeah, that's my fold line from my placket. And this right here, so I'll show you my notches. This is my fold line right here. This is the center line where the placket's going to line up with itself, like on this. See right there, that's my center line. So there's fabric this way and fabric that way, because you need to frame your buttons and buttonholes. You need that extra to create the overlap. Otherwise, you wouldn't want it this way. Otherwise, obviously, you'd have a slit down the front. So that center line is where it all lines up. It's the center front. And what I'm looking at right now and I don't like is how this interfacing piece goes past here, because see, it's going to do that. It's going to fold over on itself, which can create a ridge. So I'm going to cut this off. I'm going to cut about half of an inch off. I want my interfacing to be only the width of my finished placket, especially since I'm using fabric and not Pellon, like a store-bought, because the store-bought stuff is a little bit thinner. You can get it in different weights. It just means like it would sit in there a little nicer. So I'm just going to trim this off. Straight as I can. Normally I would just go to the table and do this with my rotary knife and my ruler, make a parallel line. It's a pretty narrow placket, and if I fold it on this line where I'm cutting it right now onto itself, that's going to create a ridge down the center of where my buttons and buttonholes are. So that's just my personal preference. And that is like one little thing I feel like I could have done differently on the Hawthorne dress that I'm wearing right now. Because this fabric is so lightweight that I don't actually have gapping. What's happening is my buttonhole drawed in the fabric, and I should have thought of that. And what I could have done to prevent that was take a little bit of store-bought interfacing, just a little rectangular square, and put it behind the buttonhole to reinforce that. So that way it wouldn't have drawn it in so badly. Are you not be able to see? I'm sorry, yeah. Is that better, Brooke? I know, I don't want you to have to see my lap, but what if I did that? What do you think of that? I used to have it taped on here so I would remember to keep things inside the frame, but then I keep moving my camera and the tape's distracting. All right, that a little better. And do you want it brighter? Tell me what you think. There's a delay between when I'm talking and when you guys write. Like what you are commenting on is a little different. So, better. Okay, good. Do you want me to repeat anything? Okay, so I just trimmed about a 1/2 inch off of that. So I'm going to put it in my fold line, just like that. A quick way to do, no what? I don't need to repeat anything. That's probably what you're saying no to. A quick way to do this placket would be to serge this edge. But I'm going to turn it under like this, because I like the way that looks better. So I could have even trimmed this inner facing down even more because of this fold right here. All right, so first I'm going to fold it along that, and I'm going to pin it down like this. And that way I don't get any torquing. I just want to make sure that I'm not getting torquing in my placket, because it is the front line of sight, right? That's the first thing people see, is right down the center of your garment. So I was just on the edge. Yeah, exactly. I do that, like, I'll cut things over the garbage can and it's like totally off camera sometimes. I'm like, yeah, you can't see that. Okay. And so what happens with this, don't do that, see that? Okay. Is this gets inside this placket in here, and then it's all hidden like this. So obviously I have like way too much right now, because really all I only needed to go to is about right here to this fold line. So what I probably can do is trim it best I can along that fold line of this. I'm gonna refine that, don't worry. We're doing this on the fly. I like showing how I do it without instructions too, because I feel like it's good to see how someone's figuring out how to do something without the instructions in front of them, because then you can see, it's almost like when you do a math problem and you have to do the reverse math to check your work. That's what I'm doing. It's like I'm checking my work to see like where it's going to go. Like, why would I want that? Why wouldn't I want that? Sometimes it backfires. You know, like certain things you try it and you just don't know it's going to work until you do it wrong. So what I did was I'm just cutting it along this fold line here, because that is what's going to happen. It's going to be nice and tidy in there, just like that. All right, so let's pin this one as well. And make sure there's like no little thread pieces in there, because that might create like a bump. Like if you're using a white fabric, you might see that little piece of thread through the white fabric, or it might have a bump. Depends on how lightweight your fabric is. Okay. I'm hoping I'll be able to upload some more how-to videos next week and some sew-throughs. I'm really trying to not let this interfere with launching my fall fabrics for chicken boots. Like, you know, this is my playtime with you guys, hanging out and sewing and stuff. I don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm just having fun with it. And but my husband and daughter are traveling for a couple of weeks starting on Wednesday, so I actually may have a little bit more free time to create some more videos, or maybe some more sew-throughs. I really want to sew that Charlie Caftan again. And I'm cutting out some Burnside bibs. And I picked like a lightweight stretch denim that I got at my local fabric store. It didn't need to be stretch denim, it just is. And it's not going to affect it. Okay, so now I'm just going to move that one. I'm going to sew this. I just needed to see that, so that's why I was doing that. So I'm going to fold this on itself like this. Just going to stick this in here to get it out of my way. Make sure now that it's lining up. folding the placket on itself. This were Pellon, you'd be able to really see that. I'm going to start. And then I'm also going to fold the hem I'm going to use on there. I'm going to go to where I started that. I'm going to trim the little corner so that when it folds to the inside, oh shoot, oh, I did a classic mistake that I haven't done in a really long time. This needs to go on top. See? That's where I want it to end up inside there, but you know, it needs to be on top before I go. I'm really gently taking this out because this fabric's not very forgiving. Like that. See that? Looking to see if you guys are like, stop! You're about to make a mistake! Can't blame it on you guys this time. See, just like that. I don't want to line this edge up with this because this is actually squared off. And remember, this was at an angle. There we go. Like that. Making sure my placket is still folded there. I feel like I went one stitch too far. We'll see. Just like that. It's gonna go inside. Oh, I didn't get my my notch. It's not deep enough. I'm actually gonna take out some of my understitching too. I'm sorry, guys. I'm like keep backing up. I just really want this to look good because it's a solid fabric, and I feel like it'll just look really nice if it's nice and crisp. And so I'm trying to set it up. I know what I want, you know? I know what I want. I'm gonna go further down because the notch is a little too deep. Kind of continue with that line there. There we go. Just like that. There we go. So it's going to go inside there. Just like that. See? And we'll turn under all this and go all the way around. Now we've done it once. We're not going to make the same mistake, right? Fold there on the notch. Fold back my hem of my placket. Put my bias on top. I'm going to look to see where that slit is. The slit's not as deep, it looks like this time. I really want to trim this off. Don't do that. It'll be nicer later if you don't. Just making sure that all lines up in a nice smooth transition there. I have my stay stitch edge showing right there. So I'm going to get rid of that. I may even pull some of it out. There we go. So it'll look like this on the outside with my stitching line. Can you see that? Here's the inside. And now I'm just going to go for it. Struggled long enough. I'm going to turn it under 1/4 inch. It's a pretty narrow placket on this shirt, so you have to kind of use smaller buttons. You could serge this edge and just top stitch it down, not even have to turn it under. You can iron the folded edge there to really make sure you're going to get it. These pins are going to help me, but I am a little concerned with torquing with this fabric because it's very whooshy. Because see, when I'm turning under that edge right there, it looks nice, right? It looks perfectly fine, no torquing at all, right? I'm not doing anything to it. But the thing is, your presser foot is pushing the fabric forward. Your feed dogs are grabbing the fabric to pull it through the machine. And so what's happening is you have these two motions making your fabric slip. So getting this pressure correct right here and making sure you're not doing anything to aid in torquing is kind of the key. It's not always you. You may have done everything right, but your machine sometimes is doing a little bit of moving. It could be your fabric style. And so what I try and do is, like, I'm pinning it so that that's my, like, I know I don't want any torquing, right? So telling it, that's kind of your 0, 0 point right there. I feel like I'm seeing some, but I think it's just the shadow of the pin. I don't see the pin, I just see the shadow of it, and I'm like, wait. The other reason you don't want to have this start, coming towards you and creating that torquing, because torquing, is what this is when you get the torquing, right? This is pulling this way, this is pulling that way. And this is your end point. You don't want this to happen, right? We've all had that happen to us. And what I like to do when I get close to the end down here is I'm going to make sure I'm going to tell this, I'm a boss. This is where I want you. So I'm going to try and relieve all of the pulling, because this way it doesn't have an opportunity to do that. This is where I want it. I'm going to do a pin towards the machine right there. Put my placket under there a little better. I'm going to get rid of these threads so they don't create any little bumps under there. This is a yarn dye. That's why the warp and the weft are two different colors. Gives it that chambray texture. This was the fabric we used as the lining in one of our seasons one year, and it was a real big pain to work with. It's a fashion fabric, but we really wanted the way it looked, because it looks kind of Western, and it was with this little Dalla horse print. It went really well. It was very plain, but I really liked it. Okay, so I'm going to help myself here I'm going to pin this right now, like that. Because when I come to here, I'm just going to turn the corner and go around the neckline. I'm not going to stitch right here. You can whip stitch it later if you want, but I'm not going to. It's fine. I'm actually going to do this all the way like that. Just like that. I always pin perpendicular to my seam so that my machine can sew right over it if I don't have an opportunity to pull the pin out. And this is the way I want to pin, right? We all want to pin like this because it's easy to pull the pin out. But you can hurt your machine and you can injure yourself doing that. And honestly, sometimes you just won't have a hand to pull out a pin. You might be holding something else. So you would really like to make sure, I'm going to trim this right here. I'm just going to get rid of that little tag in there. I'm having trouble committing to this little fold right here. Like I keep getting it and then I'm like, I don't know. Okay. I really want it to be narrow there, but the seam allowance of the placket inside is fighting it. I'm going to get a little closer here. All right, you see that? And this is creeping a little bit, so I'm going to try and correct it. Where's my awl? Because I really want this seam edge straight up and down. And I'm going to put this Wish that would get in there better. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna leave my needle in there. Take out my pins. The reason I really wanted to do it like a continuous stitch is that I love the way that looks on the outside. Now remember, my bias, remember I pulled it, so it's evident, but it wants to turn under now. It's like, I'm too tight. I need some place to go. Tell me what to do. It also helps that I won't have to iron beforehand because it really wants to behave. What I love about shirts like this and garments like this, the same with like the Charlie Captain, once you get this like big step out of the way, the rest of it goes together really quickly. Like I'm making this look a little harder than it is because this fabric is a little bit tough. But it's going to be a dream to wear. I'm going to notch that a little bit more. The understitch kind of made it a little tighter. Remember, we do this because this, if you were to measure this edge right here to what it's folding to over here, this is a shorter distance. So you need to release the tension so that it can actually spread out and then lay flat. I thought I ran out of thread. Of course I would, right? But I have lots of bobbins. This is actually a thread color I'm using right now, so. This fabric's thick. Like this binding is pretty thick right here. Okay, now we're getting to our tricky bitch. You guys aren't saying anything. I can't tell if I lost you, if you're just like, oh, this is boring. Anyone can do that. Okay, so I'm going to do my little, keep all the weight of your garment on the table if you can. If you're doing a really, really big garment, like a dress or something like that, or you have a lot of hemming, put it on a chair if it's too big for your table. You don't want the garment pulling off of the machine table. It will pull against your needle, which can bend the needle, which is dangerous for you and the machine. Because if you break a needle, that can throw your timing off, and that's a problem. And you also can break a needle, which can land anywhere, including your eyeball. So you don't want that. And it also torques the fabric, so that weight of the garment pulling will torque what you're trying to sew. And you don't want that either. So I'm gonna trim a little bit, get rid of some of that. I read the way Colette does this, and it was a very just do this and it'll go in the placket. And I was like, that makes sense to me because I figured it out before I read it, but at the same time I thought, so there's a lot more going on with my fingertips right now than just putting it in the placket there. Their instructions are correct, but I know it can be a little tricky. I really want this to be narrower. It just fights against the seam allowance of the neckline. That's why I keep having to fiddle with it. Plus it's a lot. I'm gonna trim a little more. Just gonna trim it down. Not boring, are you kidding? Really? You guys are so quiet. You're not like saying anything, so I'm like, I can't tell. I don't know. I can really geek out on watching people do stuff like this. Most of the streams, like I said, most of the streams I watch are more gaming related, and I do sit there kind of just geeking out on like, how do they do that? Why do I do that so badly? That's what I'm always thinking. Why do they make it look so easy? And I just think, yeah, because they practice and they do it for 8 hours a day. That is exactly me. I do this 8 hours a day, and I've been doing it since I was 15 years old, and I'm 47. So I have never stopped sewing. Even when I worked on a farm, That was how I would earn extra money at the farm, was hemming people's pants and putting patches in. We were also broke. We couldn't buy new clothes. I sewed for people for jars of juice because, you know, I could only afford to eat what we grew on the farm, and we grew everything. We grew vegetables, meat, dairy. We had it all. I was really lucky to be on a farm like that. But I made $220 a month, and I had to pay for my car insurance. All right. I think I got that. There we go. And but I have a huge sweet tooth, like no joke. And I didn't really miss candy or anything like that, but we didn't grow a lot of fruit, like stone fruit and things like that, things I really like. And so I would always ask for a jar of juice, like 100% real juice, nothing added. And that would be my payment. People thought it was a bargain, and I was thrilled because I didn't have to drive to town to get a jar of juice once in a while. I didn't want them to give me the money for it. Oh, Janice, I just got out I think I said the other day, like, since I moved to Chico, I've discovered wool moths, and I just keep finding more and more knitting with little holes in it, and I've done the wool moth traps. I think I've gotten rid of them. I'm just still finding the after effects of them discovering me. And so I want to repair all those things. It'll be a good test, right? Like, repair all those things, and then that way I'll know if it's continuing. But it's kind of a big pile. And then it starts making me analyze a lot of my sweaters and be like, yeah, maybe I'll just unknit this whole thing and use the yarn. Maybe I'll donate this. I stole buttons off of one the other day for this dress. Because I just thought, oh, I love this sweater, but I'm kind of tired of orange buttons on it. Did I get any torquing? Doesn't look like it. Let's see. Okay. It's easy to get it a different width at the bottom than what you've been doing. Okay. There's a snazzier ways to finish your placket at the hem rather than just, you know, hemming it like this. This is a shirt. Like, I put this in the shirt category, not blouse. So I'm just going to do a rolled hem. So there we go. And see, look. Can you guys see? Nice continuous stitch. What do you guys think? You like that? I like it. This is how it looks on the inside. A little different length there. It happens. Doesn't bug me. And on this one, probably gonna line up my placket like that. Yeah, just like that. See? That's what it'll look like. We are spellbound. I saw that. Okay, let's see how my neckline looks. I'm kind of curious how it's doing. So it doesn't look like it's gapping. See, these little lines are because I pulled my bias. That's okay. I'm fine with that. I like the kind of rustic look. It's not torquing. Yeah. How about we put some sleeves on? I'm gonna do my cuff. This little sleeve has a cuff on it. This is how I serged my sleeve. I put it through the serger as one. See? Time-saving techniques. Just keep going. And then I made sure also that I had, like, this is the back and this is the front. See, 1 notch front, 2 notches back. I know you can barely see that. I'll make them a little bigger so you can see it. And that way I know I have a left and a right. That's why I did it that way. It'll also help me determine left and right on this because the fabric is the same on both sides. Yeah, it would look good as a sleeveless top. The only problem with making this a sleeveless top is the armhole is built for a sleeve, and so you would have to raise the armhole up and cinch it in a little bit because there's ease there. And if you don't do that, your bra is going to show. So just know that. Usually you go up 3/4 of an inch and in a 1/2 inch, 3/4, something like that. So it's a little closer fitting right there. You want it close fitting around your armhole. So it would be really cute though. There are some really good tank patterns out there. All right, so I have a lot of cuffs here because I didn't buy interfacing for this. I have it, and I didn't really need to buy it. And they're cut on the bias. I don't remember that, but I guess so. I'm kind of thinking, is that how thick I want it to feel? Let me see. It might be overkill. Yeah, I'm going to leave off of the interfacing on these because this fabric, it doesn't look thick to you guys, but it is kind of thick. So this is my tip for putting on cuffs. Oh, let's do our underarm seam first. So right sides together. I know that's my right sides because remember I like my serging to show a certain way. And then also, this is like my key, my little hint, so I won't put on 2 right sleeves or 2 left sleeves. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of all this, because that's how I roll. I feel like I'm still learning some of the mysteries of sewing, and one of them is, what do you do with this? Anyone out there? Tell me. I know there's some pros out there that tell me. Okay, so see this mess here? It's not going to matter on this garment. That's going to get enclosed in a cuff, but it does matter in some cases. Like if you're doing an armhole, which I'm going to serge the armhole on this, I'm going to be in a continuous circle and I'm going to come back around onto my serging and then I'll have this little tail. And so what I always do is I pull it so that it tightens it up. That was a little too short to start doing it at, and the other one was, the first time I did it, it was too long. So let's see, let's cut it about here. I feel like, I don't know how I've gone this long for not knowing how to deal with the serger ends. Like even in the factory, I didn't really see a whole lot of that, and it wasn't an issue because they're just butting things right up against each other, trimming it, and it gets enclosed in a seam. And on an armhole, what happens is when they come around the curve and they sew that tail off, the serging is a little tighter and it doesn't have this loopiness that a home serger does. So that's my mystery. I'm still trying to, like, if I'm ever at a convention, I'm going to be like, how do you do this? I can't wait. Okay, so now I think like before, when I was a new sewer, I would have hated doing these cuffs. I would have wanted the cuff, but I would have hated it because I would have hated doing the end treatment, the rolled part of it, because I would have hated trying to sew straight up and down and making it look perfect. So, because, you know, usually what you would do is sew it on the outside first, turn the cuff to the inside, and then top stitch it down. And then that top stitching it down could land anywhere on the outside. So there are 2 ways to do this cuff where you don't have to worry about that. You could serge it on, fold it in half. Let me sew my cuff in a circle first, and I'll show you what I mean. If you really want a quick and dirty way, that would be the way to do it, is take your cuff, sew it in a circle. There's even a quicker and dirty way, and I'm not going to show you because I don't want you sewing your sleeves that way. I don't want you sewing your sleeves in flat. It's a pet peeve. I have pet peeves, and sleeve construction is one of them because sleeves fit a certain way. So this is one quick and dirty way, is you could put your cuff on here, fold it in half, and just sew it on all in one, and then top stitch the seam, especially if you were to finish that edge and serge it or something. I'm not going to do that because I just don't want to do it that way. I'm going to do it the harder way, and that means I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to sew it from the inside first to the outside. That way I'm ending on the stitch that shows to the public. Oh, that's a good idea, Christina. See, sometimes when I'm doing knits, I feel like I'm in such a hurry because knits are so much faster, you know, and like if I have to stop and do that over and over again, you know me, I don't like hand sewing. Okay, so, but that's a good one. So you pull the serger tail threads and you put them in a tapestry needle and weave them in. Christina, you're a knitter, right? So it's kind of like when you're weaving in your ends of your knitting, you're just doing it into the serger. Smart. Okay, so I have put the cuff right side to the inside of the sleeve. See that? Lining up my seam. I'm also going to put the seam open. And I'm going to turn the sleeve right side out so that I can sew from the inside of my circle. I always talk about that. It's a lot easier. Then you don't have to worry. I don't need pins for this. It's the same circumference. I'm just going to make sure I get it all in one. Cast fabric. I know it's cut right, and it still wants to grow and be a different length. It's the one thing I actually checked. Okay, so there we go. We have one. Let's do our other one. This is on the bias, so that's partly why it's going to stretch a little bit. But when it's on the bias, it can be a little softer around the bicep and also, okay, yeah. Okay, Christina. Cool. I might try that. Bias will make it softer and also, you know, because, you know, we all have big biceps, right? Oops, I almost said it's the wrong side. Okay, so right side to the inside of my sleeve because I'm going to end on the outside. And then I'm going to turn my sleeve this way. You can line it up first, like just from here. So if I just want to give you a visual, that's the right side of my sleeve. Inside, I have my cuff, so starting on the wrong side. Make sure this serger doesn't show on the outside. Did you see the angle of those seam allowances were? That was really weird. Okay, so now I got it in my machine. It's secure. The needle's down. It's holding it there. Now I adjust. You can pin it. See, because this is bias, I still get this little bit of rippling, but I'm going to tell it, no, you can't grow yet. I don't want you growing yet. But that does mean that my next step will be a little trickier because of the bias. It's going to want to stretch out when I'm trying to roll it under and top stitch it down. But we're the boss. We're going to tell it what we want. Get rid of all this. I don't want that inside. Okay, I'm going to flip my sleeve the other way now. I always sew on the inside of my circle. And now I'm going to pin it in a few places. I'm going to turn it under. I'm going to start at the seam line here. You could iron this. It'd be easier. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this even easier for me. I'm going to go like this. I'm going to mark it halfway. So like this. I'm going to mark it like that. And same with this piece. I'm going to mark it halfway. And then that gives me a target. And this I'm not going to pull very hard because it's on the bias. I'll do this one right now while I'm doing this. So I'm just folding it in half basically. You can do this before you sew it. Be a little easier. The pattern was not marked this way. But I'm always trying to give myself guides so I don't have to use my pins. I always keep this clean. I'm actually not fastidious, you guys. Like, I just keep my surface clean because that can get into your sewing, and then you're just like, it's just a step later. It just, you know, helps. And I think it just comes from being production sewing. You want it as clean as possible when it's leaving the machine. All right, so now we're going to start pinning. Turn under my seam allowance. And remember, I am now pinning this to the right side of the garment, the part that's going to show. So I'm going to pin this just like barely past the seam I've already sewn. And this is kind of how I would sew binding. I know where my seam is. This is what's great about doing this on the right side of the garment. I know where I sewed already. I can see it. There's no mystery. We don't like mysteries. I'm making sure that this is nice and smooth right here. And the reason I'm doing this to anchor it down is so that I have these targets as I go along. And now I'm going to start. I'm not going to backstitch because I may want to take it out, but mainly because I just want to reduce the bulk of the stitching. So it would have been good to iron this way. Now I know that I want a 1/2 inch seam. The being on the, I don't think I sewed my other one on the bias. I'm kind of feeling like that's why this one feels different. That and the fact that this fabric is so whooshy. So I'm going to make sure that it's the edge is under all that length between this target and that target, and that it looks like it's the same width, so that I know I'm kind of setting myself up for success there. Like that. Okay. And do you see I'm like flattening out my sleeve back here? I'm flattening it out back here so that I can get as straight as possible. It's really easy to get an angle, to get a little off track. But I straighten it like that. And remember, I told you also my machine sews in a very straight line, so if I get a little off, it can kind of be a bad thing for me. Home machines are a little bit more forgiving that way. They get off, if they get off their, it's very gradual, and you can kind of correct it without knowing. On the industrial, it's a little committed that way. And so the reason I do it this way to the outside is so that I'm not worried about the inside. No one is going to see that. Yeah, it's all fine and dandy to say that you want the inside of your garment to look as good as the outside. That's awesome. It's not necessary. And this kind of step, like if you started looking at the way they do it in the factory, it still wouldn't even look this good. And they most of the time do this. I learned this in the factory. So then there's my cuff. See, and that's what I just stitched down. So I agree, like right here, I need to probably make sure my stitching is a little straighter. But when I iron this, it'll probably look fine. And now I have the next one to do better. And if I really don't like that one, I'll take it out and do it again. And see, the little torquing is because the fabric's on the bias. It's going to do that. I actually don't recommend putting the cuff on the bias because see, it's not torquing everywhere, just in a couple spots. I don't really feel it's necessary, you know. So that's my sleeve. So that was my trial one, right? So if I'm not happy with it, I can do it again. So maybe this one I'll iron. Let's see if that one goes better. I think that's a good idea, don't you? I'll iron this one so that the sleeve hem is down into the cuff. I think that'll help shrink up this piece a tiny bit, like not shrink, but just makes it a little, it's gonna want to behave better. Okay, so I ironed it down. I'm going to turn the sleeve so that it's right side out. I mean, wrong side out, but the right side of the sewing. It's so confusing, I know. And I do my anchor point pinning. So do my first one right there. And remember, I notched my other centers, so now I have those targets. See, that looks off. Do you see that? So let's double check it. Did I just get it folded off? Is it really stretching out that much, the bias? I mean, look, that's pretty good. Right? Let's see. That's on the center. So maybe I got this marking off a little bit. Always checking your math, right? Like we're going to check. I'm going to do it right there. Maybe that's why. Yeah, so I think that's what it is that my seam here isn't sewn perfectly lined up. It's like 1/16 of an inch off. That can add up to a lot. So I'm going to fold it on the seam line of the cuff right here to find my center. Yeah, so I got that a little off. That's good. That's what we wanted. We wanted to hear that because that's why we check our math, right? Do that problem the other direction. I'm going to pin this one so I know it's the right one. Okay, so I'm going to do this on the inside. An extra step in ironing would have been to iron this edge under of the cuff. Okay, I know it's the one going to my left. Sometimes I even say those things out loud to myself here because I feel like if I've heard myself say it, I remember what I said. Do you ever do that where you figure it all out, you figure which side you're going to do something, and then by the time you go to do it, you're like, what did I figure out? Which one was it? And that is so frustrating. So sometimes if I just say the word left out loud, I hear it and it helps. Okay, so I'm going to try and minimize the torquing a little bit by doing this. Like I'm going to pin this like this so I know that it won't want to go past that. Kind of helps. I'm just hoping that that's about the fold line. It's hard to tell. On the bias, the fabric being on the bias, it doesn't want to fold. Like if it were cut on the straight grain, it wants to fold on the grain, right? See how the bias, what it's doing is it's wanting to go like this. It's wanting to fold this way because this is the straight grain. That is. That's what it wants to do. And that's what I'm fighting right now, especially with this weird wishy fabric. So I don't really personally think there's any reason you need to cut this on the bias. It'd be really cute though if you're using a contrast print or even just if this was a striped shirt and then you did little bias cuffs, that'd be pretty cute. I'm not gonna lie, I'd like to see that. This feels like it wants to torque really bad this time. Why? Don't do that to us. I also made a little collage of pictures in my dresses so you guys could see how they fit after you sat there and watched me sew them both. They're on Instagram, nothing new. They are the pictures of that my teenage daughter got out of bed to take for me. So you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? I'm going to turn this way while I pin it. I think it'll be a little easier. Yeah, look at that. That's already a lot easier. Turning it this way. One tip I've learned is if you're pinning something and there's fabric behind you keep catching it, you can put a ruler behind as like a backstop. That way you're pinning the ruler and not the fabric behind. That. Slide your ruler along. This is what I should have done. I should have pinned it from the outside, or you know, like this, with the cuff on the outside, and then gone to sew it. There you go. We learned something. Especially if you're going to stick with the bias, because the bias, it just has its own agenda. See that? Bias. I love bias. You guys know it. I mean, I use a lot of it on a day-to-day basis as binding. And I literally did that like when I started Chicken Boots because I love the way it looked and I wanted to know how to sew it. It was almost like one of my sewing phases. But it ended up becoming part of a business that I had to stick to. All right, what do you guys think? That looks way better, don't you think? Let's sew this puppy. Let's get our sleeves done. Once we sew this, all we have left is to attach the sleeves to the side seam on the bodice, attach the sleeves on the bodice, and then hem it. It's a pretty quick sew. And then buttons and buttonholes, of course. See, now that I'm sitting here sewing it, it wants to do something funny. And it's because of the bias to the straight grain. My goal this time is more of a straight stitch, parallel to that fold edge. But I can see, like, because of what I was explaining earlier with the presser foot pushing, the feed dogs pulling with the bias, it wants to be a wiggly line. I'm taking my pins out as I go, just because otherwise they're poking me. Okay, sleeve number 2. Like, it looks less torquey. Doesn't look more torquey than the other one. But watch when I do this. That's bias for you. So one way you could fix this also is you could have used a store-bought interfacing on the inside, not put your interfacing on the bias. Like I could have faced these with something not on the bias. If I would have used the fabric that I cut, if I would have used this fabric as my interfacing on the bias, it would have just done the same thing. If I would have cut them on the straight grain, like Pellon is, Pellon doesn't have a grain line. You can cut it any direction, it's fine. Some of them do, but mostly what you're using doesn't have a grain line. It would have limited the bias stretch, but here's the deal. Why is it on the bias if you're going to line it with a Pellon that doesn't like react the same way as the bias? So you have to ask yourself, like, okay, if this is on the bias, why isn't the interfacing, it's not going to act the same way? So I think once this is sewn, I think another thing you can do is edge stitch this. That would help make it behave. Like, it looks really nice until I do this. Okay, so now I'm gonna add a stay stitch for my set-in sleeve. I'm gonna make it a little longer. There are like markings like here and you know, about right here on the pattern, and that's the start and stop point for the stay stitch. I don't typically use those. I usually go just from notch to notch to cut down on the number of markings my sleeve has, and also because I want a longer stay stitch, because I don't know about you, but when you put in the gathering stitch, what happens is you get that you lose the first inch on each side, and this way I reclaim that inch by just starting at the notches. I'm going to go just inside my 1/2 inch seam line. Here's my 1/2 inch seam. I'm going to go a little bit inside of it. I actually caught the directions for this, like I saw these because they were close to the placket. And I was really surprised that they say to use 3 rows of stitching for this step. And I kind of heard their argument, because what happens is if you have a lot of rows, you have less bumps. But I find having lots of rows it causes another issue that I don't really like dealing with. So what I do is I just do this one, and remember, you have to pull from one side or the other. Like, in your head, just pick one. Bobbin. I'm always going to pull the bobbin threads. That's how they teach you in sewing school, right? You pull your bobbin thread. You have to pull the same one on each end. If you pull this top one and this one's the bobbin, they'll lock up and you can't gather anymore. We've all done that. It's a pain in the butt if you have to take out all your gathering stitches because you accidentally did that, or working around it. So I'm pulling, and you see how it's ruffling up? But I still don't have gathers. I'm not pulling enough to get gathers. The reason we're doing this, you're going to hear my set-in sleeve lecture. When people put a set-in sleeve in a garment, I am like, yes, please. I like set-in sleeves. You have more mobility when you're moving around. You have a better fitting garment because it's seated here and around your shoulders. And it's generally going to be more pleasurable to wear and more flattering. As opposed to like kimono, which you're seeing a lot of right now, which is like no seam right here. It's just all in one. Or raglans are pretty good, but they have limited upward movement without a lot of crazy stuff to do it. I'm an expert in that, actually, because of somewhere I worked. And but what I often see is people will sew a garment set-in sleeve, and then they will write a bad review about it saying the sleeve pattern doesn't work. And it's because the sleeve is actually a different length than the armhole you're sewing it to, because sleeves were designed to have ease in them because of this right here, because you're putting this cylinder to this cylinder, and so you need a little bit of ease here. And you can probably see how my shirt, like I'm trying to get like a little shadow behind, like a white background. My sleeve goes like this. That's a nice set-in sleeve. You need that little puff right there, to that curvature, to create the ease that you need around your bicep up here, this high bicep, your cap. And without it, like what happens is sometimes people will put the sleeve in. This is why I always put my sleeves in a circle, never flat cap to the garment when it's open. Like, that is a nice quick and dirty way to do it. You do it in knits a lot because it's not as important, because knits are stretchy and the sleeves usually fit perfectly. There's no ease with them. Because you want the circle. I really like doing it in a circle because it fits better. You won't get a weird pulling here. This is a very subtle fitting technique, but it is true. And I kind of lost track where I was going with why I'm really into this. Oh, I know why. Because, okay, if you put your sleeve in on the flat, like, say this is how I put my sleeve in. I did the cuff maybe flat as well. And then I put the sleeve on. This is open, right? Pretend like this is open. I haven't done my armhole or my side seam of my sleeve. If you put in your sleeve like this and you end up with extra sleeve poking off the end, people just cut that off. Because they say, oh, the pattern doesn't fit. It was drafted poorly. No, that's not true. It was actually probably drafted brilliantly. Oh, shoot. Was I pulling the bobbin? You guys. Which one was I pulling? Which one was I pulling? This one. This one. Okay. Phew. When they have that extra, they just cut it off because they're like, I can't fit that in there. How would I fit that in there without getting gathers? I don't want a gathered sleeve. This is how you do it. You pull up the excess by creating this even tension around the cap. Once you figure out this technique, you'll never ever have problems. You'll enjoy sewing set-in sleeves. You'll enjoy wearing them, and you'll have a nicer garment. Set-in sleeves are just the way to my heart. I mean, I know it's not like always on every garment, and that's okay. The Charlie Kaftan doesn't have that. The Amelia dress doesn't have that, and that is where my Amelia dress suffers. That's that dress I like to wear a lot. I wore one the other day. The whole dress is cut on the bias, but I will tell you what, it's a stress point right here because there's no armhole. And what happens is both my dresses have ripped right there because it's a stress point. And that kind of sleeve is not built for that, that kind of movement all the time. It's more fragile. Okay, so because your garment's all clean, finished, make sure you don't get confused and sew the wrong way. Okay, we're going to actually do our underarm seam. Sorry, I keep putting it on my lap. Now that I move the camera, I feel like, oh, I'm free to put things on my lap. No. I'm going to do my underarm seam. Darts get pushed down. It's usually very obvious because when you, well, it's actually not very obvious this time. Sometimes it's very obvious. You'll see the shape of the dart legs. You do want to line that up, otherwise you can get some pulling. I'm going to put a vent in my shirt. I can see where the notch I created here. And a vent is just a side slit. And that's because of that sway back issue I told you guys that I have. The vent's going to kind of release the pressure across my back. Could I put a gusset in my Amelia? No. I know that's crazy, but I can't because what happens then when you put a gusset into the armhole, it makes it bigger. And then I'd have gapping and you'd be able to see inside my dress right here. So, if it were a longer sleeve, yes. If it were a longer sleeve, that would be very uncomfortable with that kind of sleeve armhole treatment. So, this is such a subtle topic that it's really, really important. Like, sleeves they're their own beast. They're on the level of pants as far as fitting and pattern drafting goes. You just don't hear about sleeves because the designer has done most of that work, and we don't vary as much in sleeves fit issues as we do in pant fit issues. But they're both the same situation, a cylinder to a cylinder. They're just a little different. Oh, my fabric's snagging. See that? This fabric has a lot of irregularities. I don't know why, but I think I cut the wrong size out on one of these, on the front or the back. So yeah, so Brooke, I've been reinforcing my Amelia, but it's getting to the point where I'm getting like sloppier and sloppier with the reinforcement because I'm just like, oh gosh, it's ripped again. And it's, I'm kind of active. I'm really hard on my clothes. I'm not going to lie about that. The Amelia would benefit from is an armhole and a cap sleeve, so set-in sleeve, and then you have an actually distinct oval because If you look at the Amelia armhole, it's a straight line. There's no armhole. It's just a straight line. And then it's like this. This is exactly what the armhole is like. Just picture this becoming the shoulder. Let's see if I can just lay this out like how it would be. This is how the armhole looks on the Amelia. It looks like this. It's the side seam, and then you have a notch right here, and that's it. And then you open it up and you stop right here and you hem around and stop right here. So it's not, there's no curve right here. This little spot right here, that's really important because this is not the same spot as right here because you wrap around, right? So, you know, that shoulder and then goes around. And the Amelia doesn't have that. The Amelia is stopping right here, or essentially out here. And then you have these different stress points. I could talk a lot about that. I just don't want to bore you guys. But I really like pattern drafting and engineering and design. Well, I'm going to take a drink of water if you don't mind. All right, let's put our sleeves in. I love putting sleeves in. I remember I used to really struggle with it until I figured out it's like another seamstress taught me that technique. And I've never stopped using it. And it's nothing, it's not even a mystery. It's like a tried and true technique a lot of seamstresses use. I was just young and probably wasn't reading the instructions, or they didn't have it in there. You know, pattern instructions weren't as detailed as they are now. I find certain things lacking about today's patterns, and then certain things are better, you know. A lot of home sew patterns for a long time were very much like, didn't even come with, like a long time ago, they didn't even come with sewing instructions. Okay, so between my notches, there's no easing. I want that to fit just the way it's going to fit. You don't want to add easing under your arm. That's not where you need it. You need it up on your bicep and in your cap. So you can just pin these spots right here and know that that is what you want them to be. And then just focus on this part here. And there's generally a notch at the top that goes to the notch here, the shoulder. I probably should have made sure that I'm not sure there actually was one on the pattern. I didn't see one. I don't notch all the things that they tell you to notch, but I'm just going to look at this. I'm actually going to move it a little bit. There we go. Yeah, maybe the notch is actually a little further back. I'm actually going to look at the pattern because you want that at the top of your armhole. It's not on that one. I'm kind of hoping it's onto the back. Oh, it's on the yoke. Nope, no notches. Okay. So it goes to the shoulder seam. Good to know. So I don't need to ease as much on here as I have. I need to ease more here. I'm going to shift that. There we go. Just like that. Okay. So I definitely don't want any gathers in my sleeve. It's not that kind of sleeve. Why is it so much? I'm going to do this proportionally. Put it in the armhole like this. Because a lot of times the yoke comes forward onto the front. Does that make sense? The seam, the yoke seam comes forward. So that's why I was thinking that's probably not my shoulder. Just like that. There's a lot of times I'll buy a store-bought pattern, I'll put a set-in sleeve on it. It kind of changes the look sometimes. I actually do it on knitting patterns too. I just never mention it. Because knitting patterns, I think doing the sleeve stuff is a pretty complicated pattern writing. And maybe some people just don't want to tackle it, or they just don't realize it's important. Because you can get away with a lot of fit things with knits because they're stretchy. You always want to sew this on the sleeve side because you want to be able to see where you're easing it, and just make sure, you know, that you're not catching your garment underneath. I'm going to sew it just to the left of my stay stitch because I want the stay stitch to be in the seam allowance. Okay. I love that Amelia dress though, so don't get me wrong. I will still make them. I love that you can use that dress on a quilting cotton, because for a long time we just didn't really have any fashion fabrics in the fabric stores, and now a lot of the companies are making more and more. And there were all these really great quilting cottons coming out before there were great fashion fabrics coming out. I got a little like funny thing right here. I felt it happen. I want a smoother transition. See that? Well, it's not as bad as I think, but I'm still going to smooth it out because that'll show on the outside. I just really want it to be a nice smooth line. And the quilting cotton is just not that great for dressmaking. It's too heavy, boardy. It's not drapey at all. And when you put it on the bias, though, it changes. And the Amelia dress allows that. It's great. And I think the pattern envelope is one of those that the dress looks kind of oddly proportioned on there. Like it doesn't, it looks really low-waisted, but it doesn't fit that way at all. It fits great. You just have to, like, it would be a good one to do a sewing thing on, because you really do have to let it hang before you hem it. Otherwise, because the dress is on the bias, it stretches out. Partly also why the armhole doesn't work really well, because it's getting lower and lower and lower. Even when you've let all that hang out, it still stretches after you've had it for a while and worn it a few times. I think this will be great in my wardrobe. I need some like tame items. I need more shirts. I'm trying to make more shirts because that's the one thing I buy more of, because you know, we have to wear them so often. Sometimes they're the ones that wear out, and I just want to start having more handmade shirts in my wardrobe. I'm going to make an Archer, which is like a button-down Oxford, but I just don't want a whole lot of button-downs in my wardrobe. I want something a little lighter and easier to wear, and I like how feminine this is. I keep meaning to get I have my basic bodice that I like created for me down there waiting to sew my next muslin of. Maybe I'll try and do that after I get done today, because then I can draft some more, because I have my own basic bodice for me that fits me. And then I can make my own patterns for me. It's just I updated it recently just because I've changed, and I really want to like refine that. Okay, so I've got my notches. Do any of you have my Notions case pattern? Have you sewn that? Because I could sew some of those, but I feel like you guys already have a video of me sewing it if you own it. You don't really need another one. It's one thing I don't sew for production still. Someone else does. I'm getting it just inside that seam. This is a little tight right here, I can feel it. Because you want most of the gathering to be right up on top of the cap. I'm letting some of it out, it was a little too tight right there. Okay, let's see our sleeves. Bam, see that? So then you see that nice curve, that bump there. That's what I'm looking for. I know you watched that video, Brooke, because I remember you saying something. It's actually not a gather, it's just where it was gathered. It can be ironed out. And over time, washing it and stuff will help. So I'll serge that later off camera, so it's because it's kind of a loud thing to do. And I would just serge it just like I sewed it just now. I wouldn't trim a lot off. I don't need to go to my seam here. I'm just going to clean up the edge and put the serging right there on the edge. It's not a knit, so I like a wider seam allowance when I'm serging. Knits are usually 3/8 for me, and wovens are 1/2 inch. So what does that leave? That just leaves my hem, you guys. So quick. I'm gonna look at my transitions here, because see, I remember I noticed my seam allowance, my side seams were a little bit off right there. I'm gonna use the rotary. It's a little more accurate for me. I'm better rotary cutting. So at every seam juncture, the transition needs to be at a right angle. Whether it's a hem, shoulder seam, no matter what. Yeah, your shoulder seam may be at an angle, but once it's sewn together, you've got these transitions are always at a right angle. In fact, you see how that seam allowance is angled up? I don't really like that. But I'm gonna make this one a little bit more, because it's a shirt tail hem. That curve can be a little tricky to hem. It's not gonna be as hard because I'm doing a vent right here. But if it wasn't, you would want this a little flatter through there. It'll be easier. Curves are always the hardest with rolled hems. Like, and when I mean rolled hem, I mean like we're gonna turn it twice, like that. I keep pressing my presser foot, sorry. Okay. It's a good way to also trim my seam allowances, or trim my threads. Now I'm not going to just trim that without checking how it looks on the other side. I don't want them to be uneven. And I also still need to check my placket lengths to make sure they're going to match when they're overlapped and the buttons and buttonholes are on. Yeah, see, this one's a little bit more curved. See that? Don't want that optical illusion that it's not the same. You definitely want a right angle at your center front, because they're going to overlap onto each other. And then that provides a seamless transition on your front as well. Okay, let's check our placket length. Oh, it's actually spot on, I think. Let me make sure. I hadn't trimmed this one up yet. I feel like the cutting mat could benefit from a non-stick underside. But maybe if I butt it up against my machine, that'll help a little bit. Like the iron is really here to hold my mat because of the pressure. I don't usually do this on my sewing machine. I'm gonna get rid of some of these little threads. I'm not sure I have buttons for this. I'll have to look really quick before we're done. Okay. Last thing, except for the buttons and buttonholes. All right, so I do my little folding technique. I'm gonna get rid of these threads here. So I do the corner, corner, and then I fold along that edge, and then I sew it under, just like that. Okay, so the reason I do this, you haven't really asked this, is because if I do this, if I just sew it, you can do this. Sometimes what happens is this little edge pokes out like that. See, like that? And then this will start unraveling, you know. So this way you're tucking it in there and keeping it so that it's not going to do that. So basically you're folding this along. This is matching up with the hem fold line, the hem allowance line. Okay, I put the weight of my garment up on the table. This would probably be a little easier if it were narrower. I could have serged this and just folded it over and top stitched it. That would be a lot easier. I don't always go for easy though. Contrary to what you think, probably. I do like things clean finished. Especially a hem that someone might see. Okay, so I'm going to back stitch there. I'm going to do the same thing. Let's see, am I going to do the same thing on my vent? I actually am just going to fold over my vent. I'm going to get rid of all these threads because they can eventually poke out and make my thing look like it was homemade. I don't want that, right? It's like that classic thing. Oh, did you make that? Well, why are you asking? Does it look like I made it in a bad way? Okay. So if this were at a weirder, like if this, see, because of this curve, this is that whole thing of like this line measures differently than this line, right? So that's why it fell short right there. That's actually working in my favor because I'm using a vent and I'm just going to fold it over. If it hadn't, you could have just tucked in this little corner and then started your vent. I'm not going to. I don't need that bulk if I don't have to. I'm going to try and match it up with the width of the hem because I'm just going to go around this vent and then keep going on the other side. And this is my mod. I added this vent. This also I'm going to make sure is the same length. So I am going to fold this one up with my little crafty thing like this. My crafty little fold. I want it to be in just the right spot. Just like that. I still don't think that's in the right spot. just like that. I'm going to go just under my pin and then fold up. The good thing about this being on a curve is that there is a little bit of bias that's going to help. You just don't want to utilize it too much because you will end up getting that torquing we don't like. And by the time you get here, you definitely want it to be straight up and down. You don't want to have been doing this, right? So we could just fold this right here to make sure, like when we get here, this is where we want to be. It's a good target. Hope I don't run out of bobbin since I'm almost done. I'm on my last thing. I don't think I should. It's a pretty big bobbin. Okay, I made it. I'm going to try and figure out how to add music, you guys. I'm not much of a music listener. I love music, but I just don't listen to it. I'm going to try and figure out a way to have it. I think it would be nice. I'm going to fold this over right now. I'm actually going to get rid of this thread too, because see how that was already poking out? It's just going to get worse over time. Now it's tucked in there. Oh, is it? Is it though? See, this whole thread, like it just keeps going and going. Sergers are so funny that way. I know a lot of people would like to have a serger. They think it's going to be faster and easier. And it is for a lot of things, but it has its drawbacks. I do feel like there's some techniques to making it look polished is tough. It's that, you know, straddling that line between how, you know, do I want it to look like a factory made it? Do I want it to have home sewing techniques which tend to make things look nicer? You know, finding what you want your garments to look like and having that, striking that balance. I'm not going to struggle this time. I'm just going to pin this right now. A much bigger hem on this side. I was just thinking like maybe I should try and make it look like that one, but I'm not gonna actually worried about that. It doesn't bug me. It's my vent. It's on the inside. I was gonna figure it out, but it was more from a nerdy standpoint. I was like, ooh. But then I was like, oh, you guys are watching. I want to put you through that. That's when I like leap up and go to the table, and then I start cutting out trials and trying things, and then I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot you guys were here, so I don't want to do that to you. Oh shoot. Speaking about oh shoot. It came unfolded at the last second. I'm still getting used to my machine, like the presser foot coming up and down and stuff, and having a heel lift. I love having the heel lift, but that's why it snaps a lot, because I forget just how much pressure to have it to keep it there, and then when it gets tired of waiting for me, it lets it down anyway, and I'm like, no wait, I still want you up. So, do you guys have any requests? I'm thinking about sewing those Burnside bibs. They are a black denim. I'm hoping they'll show up on camera. like an overall pattern, but a casual overall pattern. Do we want to do another dress? I was thinking also my needle sharp South Bank sweater. I actually looked at the hashtag for that, and it's really cute. I'm really glad the sketch on the pattern envelope is simpler in the way it looks than how it looks on the body. It looks nice. I'm hoping it works on me. I feel like I just got a point there that I'm not too excited about here. See that? I don't like that point. I'm going to see if that's a problem when I look at it. So I know that I start and stopped there, so I go back and I trim my thread right now and I look at it. I'm really good about that because that's the kind of thing that sneaks past you and you start wearing it and you're like, oh, I have a thread. I didn't even realize it. So there's my shirt hem. So that's what the vent looks like on the outside. Like that. A little bit of twerking there because of the curve. So let's see. Yeah, I totally would sew some pants. I have those ginger jeans. I've never sewed those. I'd like to probably do a muslin of those. I was thinking about also showing you guys what I mean when I say a muslin, because I know that they seem like people seem intimidated by doing a muslin because they think they're supposed to sew in a completely finished garment, and I don't. Like if I were to do a muslin of this dress, I would have cut the front, a back, and the yoke out, attached the one yoke. I would have just attached it. I would have sewn the shoulders just together, not finished, clean finished like that. I would have sewn one sleeve on, and then I would have pinned it and seen how it is. That's how I do it, and then I would throw it away, throw it in the trash, unless I did some fit notes to it and I needed to transfer them. A muslin is not finished. I know people they feel like they do all that effort and they think, I don't want to waste my time sewing this. I totally get that. I do that too sometimes. But most of the time, I do it out of a scrap fabric that I've laying around, or I buy muslin from the fabric store because it's $1 a yard, and I use that, and then I don't feel so bad, composting it or throwing it away or whatever, But yeah, I will. I need to do a muslin of the ginger jeans, and I would sew those. But what pant pattern are you thinking about, Brooke? Are you thinking about something like the Sonia Phillip pants number, what is it, pants number 1? Is that what it's named? I could do something like that because I feel like that's a nice beginning sewing pant. I don't know what the waist treatment is like that. It's probably either elastic or drawstring. You could do a pajama pant. Yeah, I like those lander pants, but the body type I see them on, they don't have hips and waists on most of the bodies I've been seeing them on, or they're putting them really low rise. That doesn't work for my body type. But let me look at those a little closer and see if there's curvier girls wearing them, or if they're wearing them. Because I don't like low rise. I have a belly. It would just poke over the top, and I hate that. So let me look at other pants. See, that's the thing, is like there's not a lot of pants on the market, and that's because they are a really tricky one to fit. But I think once you find that pattern that you really like and you know how to fit it, obviously that's gold, right? So we can totally go down that road. I am down for that, and I feel like a lot of people would like to see that. I would love some pants as well. I love sewing jeans. I love sewing zipper flies. It's been a long time. It's been years since I've sewn one, but there was one of those phases I went through where I wanted to know how to do a zipper fly, and then I had a friend who wasn't much of a sewer. She wanted to know how to do it, and so I taught her how to sew zipper flies, and we just did them over and over again. That's the key, right? So zipper flies are really not that hard. There's just like lining it up perfectly or consistently is really like the key with it. So, but yeah, I'll look at some pant patterns. I'm totally down for that. What do you think? It looks like a uniform. It totally looks like a uniform. Maybe I should have done like a contrast stitching. So here's my little vent. It's soft though. I really like how soft it is, and I feel like maybe with some cute buttons. Let's see what I have. I have some buttons. I was really hoping that I have these that Brooke gave me, but I only have 2. I was hoping that oh, I think I left them at home because I stole those orange buttons off something. Yes, I should I should totally embroider my name on the... Will you do that for me, Janice? I'm a terrible... I don't do hand stitching. You found my Achilles. You want a straight wide leg with a regular rise. All right, let's look for that. That's what I would want too, I think. Maybe not too straight. I'm a little... My hips are too wide sometimes for the straight leg, but we can find something that can be tapered as well. So I have these boring old buttons here. Look at all the orange buttons, you guys. I had a thing for them. I have these tortoiseshell. Like, this would be so, like, suitable. Are we going for suitable, though? People give me buttons. I have these really great ones that my friend Sunny gave me. These would be kind of fun. I don't want anything, though, that is too crazy, because I want this to be like a staple garment. I have a tendency, yes, uniforms are good. I have a tendency to do that splashy little detail, and then it limits the garment. But these are really cute. And I've wanted to use them for years. That's really cute, huh? Oh, it's like a history of my sewing. Like, I will, like, get over a garment that I made, get rid of it, and then I pull the buttons off and toss it. It's so terrible. I know. Oh, these are vintage. That was on something I made. Oh, that was a great garment. I was really into those folkwear patterns for a while. That was one of my phases. But, you know, you don't need a whole lot of traditional peasant blouses. Now they're really hip. Then they weren't so much. I just look like a weirdo. Oh, cool, Brooke. That's awesome. I like that guy. I get his, what's his, yeah, I think I get his email newsletters. They're so, it would be so perfect on this. Don't you think? I could just do one and then, like, maybe a denim blue, you know, button underneath that blended in. That'd be kind of cool. What would work with any color buttons? Oh, bottoms. This would work exactly. I really want this to be a versatile garment. And I have a lot of hand knit sweaters. I think it'll look good on. These are pretty neat. Let's see that. So I used to work at a fabric store, and the owner was into buttons. This is a antique French button. This one I love. It's actually got, do you see it? It's a handmade button. It's a bird in it. And I have one. Sometimes those really special ones are really expensive. But I really loved working at that fabric store. What about the white buttons that have the black detail on top? That makes them look like a 4-petal flower. Oh, are you talking about these right here? This one? They're ceramic. I do have a bunch of these. These Brooke. I love these. If this is what you're talking about, here's the deal with ceramic buttons. They're really, really cool, but they cut your thread over time, and they'll fall off. That is exactly why they're in here. They started falling off the garment that I had put them on, and I started losing them, and they were kind of pricey, and they were special. They were handmade by a local person, and I kept buying their buttons, but I had to stop because I didn't want to lose them, and I didn't want to keep spinning it. Did you mean those? I have enough of those, I'm sure. Yeah, see, here's some more. They're just really cool, ceramic. But ceramic cuts your threads. Yeah, Jody McDougal, exactly. Exactly. That'd be cool. Maybe I should buy some buttons. Oh, I have some of these. These would be cute. I have round ones by Maria. I have round little knit buttons. That'd be kind of cute. I like the idea. They may be a little big. I have to see what size I have. There's a dime. It's really amazing, like you can overlook buttons in your thing 1,000 times too. These are coconut shell. Yeah, they cut the thread. I know. It is a bummer. But be warned, when you want really cool buttons, the ceramic ones will do that. I just don't really have a, I mean, I know I have a lot of buttons in here, but I don't have a lot of one thing. So I have these Woolly Moss Roots buttons. I have 3 that you gave me, Brooke, that I was thinking that would work on here. Because I could maybe do them every other one and then do like a plain one in between. Or something like these classic tortoiseshell ones, you know. But really what I could do is just go to my yarn store. She has really great buttons. My fabric store has buttons too. I have this hand-painted one. It's pretty cool. It's only one though. Maybe I should have made a pocket and put that. Yeah, I do think about a heavy button and how it pulls, you know, because that's like those little, these little guys, if they were big, they would have been too heavy. Typically it's these shank buttons that get really heavy because there's a lot above the shank of the button, and that's what ends up pulling on your garment, you know. And then you see them droopy buttons, you know, and there are actually things that you can get to put behind your button, especially a shank, to make it sit, you know, like this rather than droop down. So I feel like we're looking at my underwear drawer right now with this button thing. Like, oh, these were these hand-painted French buttons. They're vintage. These were too heavy. These is actually kind of a heavy button. It was on a jacket. I am so bad. I'm really glad my friend Rhonda's not here. If she is, she's probably like, yeah, you. Because I would make things, spend like hours and hours on it, making it traditional and doing all of the vintage techniques. I would wear it for a year and then I'd donate it. I really wish I had some of those garments. I know, it's dumb. My mom is, if she's listening, she's like, yeah, you donate everything. It's a terrible habit. Oh, here's another one of those chickens. Because I got found out because someone was shopping in a used clothing store in my town, and they were like, I know this garment. I know who made this. I got kind of outed. But I don't know. I don't hold on to things. All right, well, stay tuned on my button selection. I love an excuse to go to my fabric store. She has really great selection. She's really into it. Because the ones at my fabric store, I'm going to go to the yarn store to look for buttons. The fabric store near me is more things like this, which are great utilitarian buttons. Like this is that's a very good look on there. What do you think about that? Like that's the right size. That's the right size. I like the white. I like that adds something. But I am pretty open. Like, I'll just go there sometimes and let people pick out my buttons. I don't really care. Like, sometimes it's good to have that feedback. This was too heavy. I loved this one. What was this on? This one's actually plastic. Alright guys, well I'm still trying to decide what to sew next Thursday. I don't think I can get a pant thing together by then, but I'll try. Maybe yeah, let me look and see what I got. I have some good fabrics right now. I know, that's what I think, Brooke. The white's not super exciting, but I'm not going for super exciting on this. I probably have enough white buttons to just do like different ones. I like these pearlescent ones the best. There's ivory. Like I could get these at the fabric store, something like that at the fabric store right away. It's right down the street for me. It's awesome. I love how close they are. And I'm so glad they have buttons because they are mostly focused on quilting, but they do have a lot of really great fashion fabrics, and I've been buying a lot of fashion fabrics from them lately because I'm determined to stay local as much as I can. But I don't think they always had buttons or zippers, and they've been adding some in there. So it may not be like the... Ooh, I found 3, you guys. I found 3. Maybe these were off of something. Sometimes when you donate a garment and it's got stains all over it, you're not going to donate it. You can't donate it because it's got stains on it. Take the buttons. You never know. They may save you. Yeah, I'm kind of liking the white look. I mean, chambray and white is such a... Oh, no. Don't do that. Eh. These, I used to have a gross of these, 144 of these, but it was for, I made these shirts for this local company. Oh, the projects I got myself into. Those are the buttons from that. I still have some. I think I may only have 3, you guys. Oh, you know, one of the tips I wanted to say about sewing buttons on is if you'll notice on this, I used orange thread. I didn't match the dress, I matched the button. So it's something to think about when you're sewing on your buttons. Just rummaging around here in my underwear drawer. Looking for like 5 buttons total. 2 more. Come on. They might be here. Maybe I'll just pull them all out. I used to be able to make Cricut do that. Oh, these are gone. Now I have to take her to the mall today. Wish me luck. Well, I'm going to use these as a guide when I go to the fabric store. These are nice, though. They're actually shell, I can tell. Yeah. All right, guys. Stay tuned for what we're going to be sewing on Thursday. It's nice to be able to just start and stop a whole project in one sitting, though. I'll overlock my armholes, and that's it for this, and add the buttons and buttonholes, and I'll probably be wearing it really soon. It's a little warm still here where I'm at, but you never know. That's awesome, Janice. Bye, Janice. See you next time. Thanks for coming. Get that painting done. God. Sorry you have to do that. I hate doing that. Yeah, good luck. And, yeah, please make sure you follow the Instagram and tell me what you want to see in here. Send me an email, sosolive@gmail.com. I have a newsletter that there's a link on the Chicken Boots USA website. And I'm just sending them like every other week. And it just says, this is what I did. This is what we're going to do. And a link to any how-to videos that we've done. It's a pretty simple newsletter. And it's also something you can just reply to and say, I would really like to see this, or I don't like so much of that. So I'm totally open. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Where's my mouse? And thank you so much for stopping in and spending some of your Saturday with me. I know our weekends tend to fill up, so